Hey guys, welcome back. So now for the past few days, you guys have been asking me my thoughts on the Wolverine vs. Blade one-shot, which I think came out on the 10th, and I really enjoyed it. I just wish that this concept was something that stretched out a bit longer, because it reminds me of a couple things that I really wish the Blade character would get that we really haven't seen in what'll soon be like 40 years. So let's get into all of this. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right in, this narrative takes place not necessarily in your modern day, but definitely a number of years back, and if I had to guess, I would say likely under a decade, making it fairly recent and not anything crazy like 40 or 50 years ago. But when they meet up here in Madripoor, it's more of a meeting of coincidence, with Wolverine having a ton of history in Madripoor, and at this time Wolverine coming to this temple pretty much to kill everything because a friend's daughter was kidnapped, taken here, and sacrificed at this temple. And this being a vampire temple, there's really not much explanation needed to why Blade's here, but more or less for the reasoning of stopping these sacrifices and destroying this temple altogether. But throughout the course of the time that they're both here, like literally cleaning up house, they drop a few references that are like your callbacks to your previous Blade/Wolverine moments. Like with Blade telling Wolverine, remind me not to piss you off, and Wolverine saying, you mean again? Which just reminds me about a bit of the history between these guys, like your Curse of the Mutants event, which we talked about a while back when Wolverine was bitten by Jubilee and turned into a vampire. And at the time, Jubilee, who was converted really just to be bait for Wolverine, she was actually left as a vampire even after the conclusion of that event, and I want to say like at this point, closer to now, with everything that's going on in Marvel Legacy, that they fixed that. Like she's no longer a vampire and she's back to being just Jubilee. But back at the time during Curse of the Mutants, when Blade found out that Jubilee was a vampire, he didn't think twice, like he was just about to kill her. And Wolverine was like, no, I'm not gonna let that happen. And he told Blade, like, if you want to get to her, you gotta get through me. But at the time, Blade just let it go and told Wolverine that she's the X-Men's problem now. Like if she starts eating the teammates, don't come to me. And another time will be like during Civil War, when S.H.I.E.L.D. had sent Blade to go and bring in Wolverine in order to get him to sign the Mutant Registration Act, which was important for Blade's character for a number of reasons. And the first one with, I'm not necessarily sure if it was intentional or not, with them making Blade look like a young Joe Jackson, but every time I think back on it, that's where my mind goes. But a couple of things that this definitely did is that it made it clear that S.H.I.E.L.D., one of, if not the highest intelligence agency in the world, they made it clear that if they needed to get Wolverine, who is the best at what he does, and what he does isn't good, then the only guy who would have a chance at doing that would be Blade. And secondly, with that matchup at the time, with the two of them going toe to toe for a while before Blade recognized Wolverine, that was like your staple for Blade, which just let us know that as a fighter, that the match between these two was close. And last but not least, within that same issue, we were shown a flashback for where Blade and Wolverine had first met each other, and it's here where we saw like your younger, less experienced Blade, who was struggling to kill a vampire, and it was at that time passing by, you got this good Samaritan in a cowboy hat and a really nice coat, who was like, oh man, you trying to kill somebody? Let me help. But nah, at the time it was Wolverine, and he recognized that Blade was in trouble, so for that reason he helped him out, and he gave Blade that coat that Blade liked so much, mainly because this younger Blade had lost so much blood and he was shivering cold as a result. But this is where the iconic coat thing started for Blade, and it's really the moment where their friendship stems from. But looking back, there's a lot of history between Blade and Wolverine, and even where to the point of much of it involves Blade pissing Wolverine off. But don't get it twisted, because at the end of the day, there's a sort of brotherhood between these two, because like in Civil War, when S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted Wolverine, after Blade figured out who this was, he went back and told them this guy's off limits. So when it comes down to it, they got each other's back. But so now while they're in this temple and like just destroying these vampires by the dozens, you have Wolverine who gets a chunk of his arm cut off, which for him of course is not much of an issue because that crazy healing factor just causes it to grow right back. But all in all, they take out these guys rather quickly, and when they're done, Blade just pretty much torches the place so they don't leave anything behind, even though a vamp or two may have made it out of there, and with doing so likely to spread the word of seeing these two together, and for reasons very likely connected to what these vampires were doing at this temple in the first place. But I gotta say, like, one of the vampires that we see watching them leaving, I could just imagine that he's thinking like, man, that guy look like Michael Jai White, and I'm gonna tell all my vampire friends that I seen Michael Jai White, and they're gonna be like, you ain't seen no Michael Jai White. Like, I seen Michael Jai White. And it's gonna be like a whole scene from Coming to America in the barbershop, but with vampires. Like, you ain't seen no Michael Jai White. Look, I seen Michael Jai White. He came in the temple, killed about 30 people, and then he burnt the whole thing down. I'm telling you, it was Michael Jai White. That'll be $8. No, but for real. And like, there's no way that there's a coincidence with this. And I love that they did this, because when it comes to Blade, Michael Jai White, he's like on that short list of people who could actually pull off this role. And I'm not saying that Michael Jai White is definitely gonna be Blade in the MCU, because this could also be a Disney Plus streaming service thing. Who knows? But I will say there's been a lot of buzz, and most recently, I would say like May of this year, about information coming from an unnamed source who probably just doesn't want to lose their job. But this inside source has made their mentions very recently that for some time now, Kevin Feige has been fighting to put Blade in the MCU. And around this conversation, there's even been a number of talks of Wesley Snipes reprising his role. And really, I think that either one is just as likely as the other. My only thought perhaps will be age, but Wesley Snipes and Michael Jai White are pretty close in age, with Michael being 51 and Wesley being 56. And it's likely that they will want someone in the role who could play the role for a considerable number of years in the future. And it's not like your Robert Downey Jr. situation, to where if he would have stayed around and continued as Tony Stark, he could potentially do that for years, because essentially he's the guy inside the suit. But as for Michael Jai White, or even Wesley for that matter, the role of being Blade has much more physical demands. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm just gonna say these two things. One, if they can do this with Kurt Russell, then Michael Jai White or Wesley Snipes could be Blade for the next 40 years. And even if they don't take that route, Samuel L. Jackson is 70 years old, so tell him that he can't be Nick Fury, the most dangerous man alive. And as a side note, really, that's how a lot of this started, even with Samuel L. Jackson, because he didn't know that he was being illustrated as Nick Fury in the 1610 universe until somebody showed it to him. And then next thing you know, he was Nick Fury in the MCU. So who knows? But so now moving forward, we jump about 6 months later from the Madripoor incident, to where we find Wolverine going up against Tamara Kurtz, who's also known as Dragoness, to whom at this point has gone full vampire, racking up kills, and X-Force is just like, Wolverine, handle that. But as it turns out, when she gets close and Wolverine damages her wing, and she gets a much closer look at him, she gets super spooked and she just takes off. But when she does, she doesn't get far because her wing's damaged, and she falls within the wreckage of this construction site. And when Wolverine goes to check it out, he senses something with a very chilling presence, and it's here that he finds this box that has markings on it, much like what he had seen in the temple 6 months ago in Madripoor, where he ran into Blade again. And he remembered that Blade had mentioned the name of this group was called the Creed. And so from there, he takes it over to Doctor Strange to check it out, and with Doctor Strange immediately recognizing that it's sealed with vampire magic, and Wolverine mentioning that he's seen the symbols in the temple, that's all Doctor Strange needs to know before realizing that this belongs to the Creed, because there are only 3 congregations of vampires who worship in a temple. And the Creed, who worship Varkas, who they say will unite all the houses under his banner, that it's likely that within this box holds the Khandra, or the answer to the only way he can be slain, which is the main reason why these vampires got this box on Hoodoo Mojo Lock and Key, in hopes of keeping whatever's in this box a secret forever. But Doctor Strange ain't got time for that. And so when he opens it up, it's like a pictogram type of image which shows Wolverine and Blade, with a symbol in the middle, Wolverine swinging low and Blade swinging high, which is pretty crazy and it freaks Wolverine out a little bit. But from here, going over to Blade, who at this time is in Germany, killing vampires, which for him is just another day, at least until this vampire he's facing off with comes at him with the laser eyes, which is something that throws Blade off, because this isn't on your list of vampire abilities. And Blade doesn't like being thrown off, and more particularly, not off a cliff. And with him seeing this vampire pull this move, a couple things go running through Blade's head. And one being that he has to figure out where this guy got these powers from. And 2, he has to go back to his informant who gave him the location of this vampire's castle and have a nice little talk. And so essentially when he blows up this cliff, catching this guy off guard, giving himself the upper hand, inside of the wreckage of this castle, he finds him and he notices a Creed symbol on his chest. But with him refusing to tell Blade where he got his powers from, and aside from Blade seeing the symbol, he gives Blade no type of leads or information at all. So Blade pretty much just leaves him there and lets him enjoy the sunrise. And so now about that informant, whose name just happens to be Desmond, which is crazy because my name's Desmond as well. But trust me, if Blade came to me about some information on some vampires, I would have been thorough to begin with, because if you mislead Blade, he'll come back. And it's likely he won't be as nice as he was the first time. But it's here that Desmond tells Blade that the Creed vampire that he ran into, that he was born that way, and those powers kicked in at puberty, meaning that he was a mutant. And all of these abductions and mutants turning out to be vampires, it's actually the Creed. They're searching for Varkas, their vampire messiah, and to do so they're snatching up mutants in large numbers in order to find the one. And so from here we jump over to Belize, at the temple where it's said that Varkas will rise from. And so with Wolverine having seen the hidden pictograph which depicted Blade within this temple, he goes there looking for Blade, thinking that he's the vampire messiah, and really just going off the information that he had seen of the picture when he looked inside that box, which he interpreted that Blade, who was also in the picture, that he's the vampire messiah, and that this translates to Wolverine being the only person who can stop him. But as for Blade, who also sees Wolverine here, to him it's too many coincidences, because unlike Wolverine, Blade also has the information to know that this messiah, Vargas, that he's also a mutant. And so to see Wolverine over in Madripoor is one thing, but then to also see him here in Belize, it's just like, okay, that's too many coincidences. But when Blade uses a glaive that is custom made to kill vampires, but he uses it on Wolverine, Wolverine's just like, wait a minute, you wouldn't happen to be here trying to kill a vampire, would you? But it's here that he shows Blade the image that was in that box that showed the two of them together with this prophecy. But halfway through the conversation, they're interrupted by Vargas, who looks exactly like Wolverine, but instead with like your Dracula Untold type armor, which is a movie I really liked, and I wish that shared universe would have worked. But that is another conversation. But as it turns out, the Creed vampires had created this body for Vargas by using that missing chunk for Wolverine's arm 6 months ago, applying some magic spells to it, and voila, Dark God body. And of course without your adamantium claws. But I gotta say, I do very much appreciate them explaining that they had to use magic in order to make this work. And the reason why I say that is because Wolverine, just regular Wolverine, can't be turned into a vampire. Because if you guys remember, back when we talked about Wolverine turning into a vampire, it was pretty much because his healing factor had been shut off. And back at the time, it was more or less a Trojan horse type of strategy that Cyclops had implemented to when later on, when needed, he could just turn it back on. And when Wolverine's healing factor came back, it in turn cured him and brought him back from vampirism. Which is why I like they made that mention of magic and wasn't just like, okay, these vampires, they just got in the lab and they cloned them. Like they put on some lab coats and just connected the electrobasic system to the antibiotic and boom. Because that would have been a little sketchy. But while fighting Vargas, Blade essentially stakes him in the heart to where it initially ignites, destroying his armor, but it doesn't kill him because at the end of the day, this guy still has the body of Wolverine, therefore the healing factor kicks in and he's able to come right back. But it isn't until Blade tells Wolverine that they need to follow the instructions of the prophecy, with Blade swinging high and Wolverine swinging low, because the prophecy was instead an instruction template on how to kill Vargas. And up until this point, they weren't able to effectively take him out until they followed that instruction precisely. And for the most part, that's how it ends. But here's the thing, I like this story a lot, and there's more within the book, which makes it a good read, but at the end of the day, it's a one-shot, and I'm not gonna judge a one-shot like a all-out series. But I do believe, had this been at least like a 4-part miniseries, and some of the events had been stretched out just a little bit, I do feel like it would have had a little bit more impact. But don't take me wrong, I liked it. But also I kind of feel like I wanted Vargas to stay a bit longer, because like I mentioned before, like just talking about the things that Blade doesn't have and that I feel like he needs, like one of those main things is like your ongoing formidable nemesis, like somebody who actually lives to combat him another day. And it could be like your Wolverine and Sabretooth, your Wolverine and Omega Red, but that's the thing, like Wolverine, he has his rogues gallery. Spider-Man, he also has a rogues gallery. Batman, he has a rogues gallery. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a gallery, it could be a single antagonist, and not so much like your Deacon Frost or Blade's father, Lucas Cross, I believe it was, but I mean perhaps like a villain with ideals who challenges Blade from time to time and actually makes him wonder like, man, am I doing the right thing? Because he is half vampire, and otherwise Blade is just so absolute. And I think it would be nice to just see him like hesitate once in a while and think like, man, should I side with the vampires? And I mean, that's just a thought, I just think it would make a good story. But that's pretty much where it ends for this one. They stop Vargas, they blow the temple to pieces, and from there they just go on about their business. But I enjoyed it, and I like to see more of it. Well, especially more of Blade drawn as Michael Jai White. But let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.